Hello and welcome to the Flipping and Wholesaling Houses in New York show. I'm Michael Pinter, where I teach you how to start flipping or wholesaling houses in New York, or if you're already doing it, how to grow your business. So we're talking about how to double close a wholesale deal. So understand what double closing means, what a wholesale deal means, right? So I define a wholesale deal where I don't double close it, because I rarely double close it, but I'm talking about what happens. But I define a wholesale deal as where I go to contract on a property, and then I assign that contract. There should be more light in here, right? And then I assign the contract. It's not doing anything. I'm in a hotel in Nashville, where I signed the contract to a cash buyer that's going to probably end up doing the work to it, or is going to keep it and rent it. Now, the concept of double closing means that you go to contract to buy it, and then you go to contract to sell it, and you double close it, which means you close on the buy and you close on the sale together. I have done that. Usually it's not necessary in New York, and I'll explain why. The main reason why people double close, and it works wonders in 49 states, is to prevent the seller from knowing how much you're making and the buyer from knowing how much you're making. That's the idea. And I understand the value of that. There is value there. However, the idea is that in other states, in 49 other states, where it's very easy to get into contract, it's very easy to get out of contract. So the assumption is that if somebody sees you're making a lot of money, they're going to be pissed off, and the seller may not want to sell to you, or the buyer may not want to buy from you, and can walk away from the deal. In New York, you are not allowed to walk away from a deal. It is impossible almost to walk away from a deal. If someone walks away from a deal, you can file a list pendants against them, which is the same as if they're in foreclosure. That means they'll never sell it to anybody else. And you can sue them for specific performance if a seller wants to leave. Buyer also. So the point of a double close is to prevent people from getting pissed off and walking away. In New York, it's not necessary. Also, and this is amazing really, New York is one of the states with the highest closing costs. So the idea to double close. So I once did a double close. It was 5 properties from one seller, and I wholesaled them to another buyer. And it cost me about 40 grand to do it. It was a lot of money. I think I bought it for $750 and double closed it for $975. It was a big deal, probably the biggest deal I ever did, a couple $100,000. And the idea was that there were other properties involved that I was in contract that I didn't want them to know, but it was expensive. So the title fees in New York are very expensive to double close, and transfer tax expensive also. So and sometimes you're going to need transactional funding. If you need the money to close on it first, then you have to borrow that money, and that costs 1 to 2% also. So I would advise against it. So just a little nugget about it. So I remember one of the first wholesale deals I did about 5 years ago was a very angry guy, and I was a 6-figure wholesale deal. I was making over 100 grand on it, and I was concerned, right? I thought this guy's going to be pissed off, walk away from the table. And my attorney, I said, listen, maybe we should double close. He said, why? I said, because the guy's going to get pissed off and he's not going to want to sell to me. And he said to me beautiful words that always have resonated with me, and they are, even if he's pissed off, he's still got to sell it to you. And that's the truth. And I've had situations, not a lot, but a few where sellers said to me, hey, I think I can get more money, I'm walking away. And all I say to them is, and this is another thing that only happens in New York, sellers are always represented by an attorney. So I say to them, talk to your attorney. They talk to their attorney and they immediately call me back and say, okay, we're going to close. They don't have any outs in New York. I don't have any outs as a buyer. I can't get out of the contract. Anytime I go into contract, I have to either assign it or close on it. But the seller doesn't have any outs to get you out of the contract either. So they can't just change their mind. So it's two sides of the same coin. It's hard to get into contract in New York because attorneys are involved. It takes time. It's complicated, but it's impossible for the seller to get out of contract. So we don't really double close. Now, how to double close? So there are people doing, I know a lot of people doing it. So what they'll do is they will just sign a straight up contract with the seller, and they will sign a straight up contract with the buyer. So it'll be that when they sign the contract, they're representing that they own the property, because they know that they will own the property at the closing. And at the closing, usually not in New York, there's a title company who will simply do 2 HUDs, right, 2 the closing statements, and just go straight from, it'll be a closing from A to B and B to C. Now, in most states, the closing costs you're talking about are a few $100s. In New York, like I said, it could be thousands and thousands of dollars. So if you have a huge deal and you're making a lot of money and there's a reason to double close, you can do it. It'll be exactly the same way. You just need the attorney has to know what's going on. The question sometimes are the funds, right? Because technically you have to close on the buy before the sale. You can't sell something you don't own. And to buy, those funds have to be there. Now, sometimes the seller will wire the funds and you can use the seller's funds, but there is a risk there. And a lot of most title companies don't care about this minor risk. They may do the closing simultaneously. I've done simultaneous closings like this where in 2 different conference rooms in the same office. But there is some risk, right? There is a risk that you're going to use the funds from the buyer, and then you're going to close on the sale, and the buyer's going to walk away, and then you got to return the funds, and then you're screwed. So that's a risk. Most attorneys are not going to take that kind of risk with their escrow funds because they could get disbarred. They screw around with that stuff. But some title companies will. In theory, I guess the other risk is if you do the buy before the sale, and then the seller, gets hit by a bus or something and can't close, then that's a problem too. But again, it doesn't happen a lot in New York. Because title companies don't run the transaction in New York, right? That's a huge misconception. It happens in all 49 other states. The title companies run the transaction. They do everything. They disperse the funds. They're the ones doing the closing statements. In New York, the transaction is run by an attorney. Title company is really just a service provider in New York. They're designed to do two things. They make sure all the liens are paid off, and they make sure all the taxes are paid. That's really it, right? Which is one of the reasons why I believe that subject to deals in New York are as close to impossible as could be. I'm not going to say anything's impossible, but it's close to impossible. Because I don't know a title company in New York, and maybe there is one, who will say, hey, we're going to allow a transaction to close without paying off the lien. That's really half of their job, make sure that lien is paid off. Now, I know in other parts of the country, it's customary that a title company doesn't mind. If the buyer and the seller contractually agree to allow the mortgage to stay in the seller's name, they don't care. But in New York, again, they're not running the transaction. They're just making sure the liens are paid off. So there is a due on sale clause. I understand. I'm a fan of Pace Morby. He teaches great. He has great sub-2 crew. He teaches a lot of great things. But when he talks about getting around the due on sale clause, he doesn't really get around the due on sale clause. He just allows you to close without the lender knowing that the property was sold. Technically, legally, you have to pay off that lien when it's sold. That's the truth. But I know in 49 states it's done. I wish I could do subject to deals in New York. I really wish I could. Very often I think they're in the seller's best interest. It's just that I can't find a title company to do it, and that's one problem. The second problem is the seller is represented by an attorney. I don't know an attorney in New York who is going to allow their client to sell a property to another party and have their mortgage payments in the buyer's hands. Because if that buyer, for whatever reason, I'm not even saying he's a bad guy, misses a payment and screws up his credit, I honestly believe that attorney is going to be subject to a malpractice lawsuit for allowing him to do it. So I don't know any attorneys that will allow it, and I don't know any title companies that allow it in New York. I know it is doable in 49 other states. I do. I just don't see how it's done in New York. So that's the whole thing with double close. Double closing is fine. Again, if you're even in New York, it's doable, but there are going to be costs, and you need. So I heard of a title company up in Hudson Valley that does it. But I actually called them. They never called me back. I called them a few times. I'm hoping that I can somehow do it in situations that call for it. But in most situations, you don't need it, right? In most situations, you just don't need it because seller cannot get out of the transaction. Buyer cannot get out of the transaction if the assignment doc is written correctly. So I don't see a point to it. And there is going to be significant costs, several $1,000s in costs. So, if you're doing, my average around $30,000 on a wholesale deal. So is it worth it? If I had a situation where there has to be a really good specific reason to do it. I don't see any reason to do it on an ordinary case. Even in a case where you have an angry seller, even in a case where a seller's pissed off at you, he's got no place to go but you if you're in contract. He's contractually obligated. What does that sign say behind it? Plan? Oh, play. He's contractually obligated, and there's no way out of that contract in New York. It's one of the best things about New York. People don't talk about it right now. New York's hard. It's hard to operate here. But I love New York, really. There's a lot of reasons, but three main reasons I love New York. I love operating New York. One, you make a lot more money than most places. Two, a lot less competition than most places because it's so different. And three, nobody's getting out of contract in New York. You don't have to worry about it. So in other states, right, I'm in Tennessee now. I know people that operate in Tennessee. What they do is, as soon as they go to contract with the seller, they record that contract, or they record an affidavit of contract or a memorandum of contract. But that doesn't really that doesn't completely protect you. What it does is it sort of clouds title if they don't sell you the property. Therefore, if they try to sell it to somebody else, that title company should call you and say, hey, what's this? And then you can ask for some money to get paid. But it doesn't really mean that. First of all, there are title companies that don't do that. Second of all, the guy may not sell it for 10 years to you, to anybody else. So it doesn't really protect you. But in New York, the guy's not going anywhere. You have an on or about date. If the guy doesn't want to sell it to you, again, you can put a list pendants on the property, which prevents him from selling it to anybody else ever. And B, you could sue him for specific performance. And any attorney, and again, almost every seller is represented by an attorney in New York, is going to tell them the same thing. So any situation I've had where a seller had cold feet, they spoke to their attorney and realized they had no options. And every attorney knows that. So it's a great part about being in New York. I love operating in New York. I know it has its challenges, but for those three reasons I told you before: more money, less competition, and surety on a deal. I think it's worth the challenges. So I'm happy about where I operate. Now, if you're interested in the ways I can help you, go to howtoflipnewyork.com. If you're interested in my course, I teach you how to do this. Go to howtoflipnewyorkcourse.com. If you're interested in one-on-one coaching, go to coaching.howtoflipnewyork.com. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. Whatever medium you're watching on, please give me a thumbs up. The likes really help me, and keep the comments coming. They really help me know what topic to discuss. I go live 5 times a week. So thank you very, very much for watching.